Um, Hi everyone. This week we are starting a new section of the book that we're working through as our book club, the outstanding user interfaces with Shiny. And this section of the book, we are working through an example where they develop a, a templating library using Bootstrap 4, and it's it will be built on over the next sort of 5 chapters. So this is chapter 16, where we're defining like the dependencies of the template, and Arthur Shaw is going to take us through the contents of this chapter. Okay, over to you, Arthur.
Thanks, Russ. Let me just share my screen. Can you see my screen now? Perfect. Yep. Yeah. So for this section, I guess given lots of factors, my overall laziness, but also I think kind of like the nature of this chapter, I didn't prepare any notes. Instead, I thought it might be useful to kind of just walk through the chapter, and as the chapter sort of invites us to do, we can look through some of these things a little bit more interactively. So look at the this tabler library, for example. So with all that said, we'll just kind of walk through the chapter and jump around links, and hopefully in so doing, I'll leave you with some impression of what the chapter is trying to deliver as its message. So it seems like, as Russ is kind of giving the general setup, it seems like the general problem that we're going to come into in this section is that Shiny uses relatively old web tools. So that's one fact. Another fact is that there are a large number of other libraries that web developers use to make really nice interfaces, and we could use those for Shiny. But the process is not trivial, and so this whole section, as I understand it, is dedicated to helping a user who would like to take, let's say, kind of a library that exists, and then bring it into Shiny. So bring it into R as perhaps a package that could be used so that an end user could have an interface within Shiny that uses more up-to-date components and benefits maybe from the work of others. So that's kind of broadly, I think, where we're going. But this is going to require some effort for a few reasons, as you can kind of see on the screen. Number one is that, as I was mentioning, Shiny is built on top of some fairly old, time-tested but old libraries. So it's using Bootstrap 3, but the rest of the world has moved on. I think we're at Bootstrap 5 now, maybe greater. So some work we'll have to do some work in order to move Shiny from effectively from Bootstrap 3 to the Bootstrap version we want to target. jQuery, or sorry, Shiny also relies on jQuery, kind of an oldish version of jQuery. And there may exist other templates out there that are written with other frameworks like Vue, React, Angular, Svelte, etc. That don't use jQuery but use something else. At least for the ones that use React, that use kind of the React engine, and would need us to bring in React somehow. So there's some non-trivial effort that needs to be undertaken so that we can take tools that exist already in the web dev universe and bring them to Shiny. So starting with this chapter, and then for the remainder of the section, the author wants us to take, as an example, kind of an arbitrary example, this dashboard template called Tabler, which provides some nice looking, provides a nice template for web pages that would look kind of as you can see in the figure below. That have some nice attributes, some nice styling that we would want to bring to Shiny and to R. So the author in this chapter kind of looks through, like, generally speaking, like, how would you start on that process of bringing another library like Tabler, that template to Shiny. So the first step, kind of maybe not surprisingly, is to look at that project, that external project, and kind of understand what its dependencies are, because ultimately we're going to have to basically tell Shiny what the what the dependencies are that it needs to kind of ingest to work. So we need to understand what that project's own dependencies are. So in this case, for Tabler, what are the dependencies? And then also the author, I don't think, doesn't say this extremely clearly here, but also the template may have a broader scope than the scope that we want. So it may have lots of widgets that are available, lots of styling that's available, but only some elements of which do we want to bring to Shiny. So we'll have to look around the project and figure out, number one, what are the things upon which that project depends, and number two, what are the things in the project that we actually want. So if you follow this link, you can kind of come to the repository for Tabler. Sorry, let me make this a little bit bigger. And you can see, like, here's all the source code for this template. And if you wanted, you could just download this, git clone it, or just download the data, and then you could download the package and have a look at and see what's inside. So in fact, I've done that. I guess you can see kind of on the left, Visual Studio Code. You can see this is kind of the file tree of all the things that are in the project. There are lots of things here, some of which aren't of interest to us, like this GitHub folder is kind of for GitHub workflows, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to kind of triage down and figure out what are the things that actually we might want to look at and we might need here. So one thing that the author kind of does a little in the book does a little bit of, feels to me kind of like hand waving of saying, like, these bits are useful, these bits are not useful. So obviously he's kind of done this work, this legwork of looking into the chapter, or sorry, looking into the package and discerning what's useful and what's not. But he kind of draws our attention to, like, a few pieces here. One is this dist folder that contains some CSS and JavaScript that we might want, as well as this demo folder, which contains some HTML pages that could be used just to understand, to kind of demo the package and understand what it generates, and maybe we can look at, through the web page, we can look at its individual components. The one part that the author didn't really talk about, that, or at least I don't recall it talked about, that I found kind of a little curious, is that, I mean, maybe one could also look in this here and like go to the, like, packages.json and kind of look at, like, actually the dependencies. So this is, I guess, from my loose understanding, basically like a little bit the description file, the equivalent of the description file to a certain extent for JavaScript or for web dev projects. There's a lot of stuff here. The scripts bit is, these are scripts that exist within this project. But here we have a name, we have a version, and then if we start scrolling down, we can see some things that might be of interest to us. Kind of look at the files that exist. This is just a little bit of a manifest of the files that exist. And then you can start to see some of the dependencies. So there are here some dev dependencies, which don't interest us. These are the dependencies just for, like, developing the thing. So there may be linters and other things like that are helpful for generating the project, but aren't required for actually deploying the project. But then if you come down here to the actual dependencies, you can see the things upon which the project depends. So there's a couple things that the author doesn't note. There's this package full calendar, which looks like it's a little sleuthing. Looks like it's responsible for generating an embedded calendar within a page. Apex charts. Here we find Bootstrap, for example. Count up JS. I think we had this earlier in the book, if memory serves, and a few other things. jQuery for a certain version of jQuery, etc. Maybe that's one way to kind of understand the dependencies of the project, but the author seems to have like a little bit of a different way. Maybe it's a bit more kind of built from an understanding of like what the project does. Maybe I guess we'll stop here, see if there are any comments or questions at this stage.
Yeah, so this is an awfully, I mean, this is a pretty big project, isn't it?
Yeah.
And but kind of understandably, really. But it, if when we um when we take a so if in a Shiny app, if we were to use this as a dependency, we would have to kind of explicitly state that this package was being loaded. But there are loads of things that it depends upon. And so when we pull in the distributed version of Tabler, does it have is all the code for, like, what did you just show? Count up um, and the other dependencies of Tabler, are they implicitly loaded when you load the Tabler files into your web page, or are they in some way bundled up inside the version of Tabler that's distributed?
That's a really good question, Russ. I don't know that I have an immediate answer, but I think we could, when we look at the demo portion, I think we could probably, we might be able to start to discern that. Yeah, I mean, my mental model, which could well be very, very wrong, is that these are sort of like, these are fetched from like a content delivery network. So in that sense, I mean, I guess you can kind of like think of this as the JavaScript equivalent of an renv lock file, where I guess we're saying like, these are the things upon which this package depends, or this library depends, and these are the versions of it. And so then there's some logic, I guess, when this project is getting built, of like going and fetching those things and bundling them up somehow. But I mean, like, are those part and parcel of Tabler itself? I actually don't. I don't know. I'm inclined to say no, only because it seems like, in the subsequent steps, the author, we're going to take as dependencies like a subset of these things, and treat them as dependencies from like the r/shiny side and individually, right? Which almost leads me to believe that we're going to have to like manually load each one of those. Like, some of those are local, those are files that are like local to this project. For example, if you look in like the dist folder, I think some of like this Tabler JavaScript, this is like part of Tabler, whereas these other things are external dependencies. That's my understanding, at least.
Okay, cool.
But I think your question is really good, in the sense that, I guess, as r/shiny developers, I think dependencies are dependencies, and so we just need to manage both sets of those dependencies somehow, right? So
it's quite, I really have no idea what actually goes on here, because, like, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, so if I didn't explicitly include, say, Apex charts in the app that I was writing, would that mean that a subset of the functionality provided by Tabler wouldn't be available to my app?
Yes, I think so. But I mean
Right,
that could,
okay.
I mean, depending on what parts of Tabler you want, that could be a problem, or that could be
Yeah, yeah,
desirable behavior, right? So
yeah,
like the
yeah.
author kind of says, some of these dependencies are big, and that, he always kind of finds it a challenge to, well, basically kind of like jumping ahead a little bit, when you're kind of defining the dependencies in a package, you need to, like, ideally you would have those dependencies loaded as local files, like local to the package, right? So if a JavaScript project is large, it might be challenging to kind of like find a bit of pieces that deliver value in a package, but stay under CRAN's 5 meg threshold,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So that's kind of the challenge, is like, hacking away superfluous bits and pieces until you're left with something that provides value, and, like I said, fits under that threshold, that size threshold. Yeah, cool. Right. Yeah, and so we kind of just briefly looked through the project a little bit. The author says the meat of things is really in here in this dist folder. Some of these other folders are really more for building the project. They're useful for JavaScript developers, but not for us. And he doesn't really like describe like a clear general purpose process for figuring out which dependencies are required dependencies, but instead kind of gives us the answer here, right? So for us, it really amounts to these four things, that in order for us to have the pieces of Tabler that we're going to use for the remainder of the section, we need to have Bootstrap 4, jQuery. I had like a more up-to-date version of jQuery, and then this logic from Tabler itself. So its CSS and its JavaScript files. And yeah, so he was kind of saying to inspect the dependencies. I guess I kind of jumped the gun. Like, you can look at the project as we just did, but also, like, maybe equally or more helpfully, one could come and look at the demo project. So there are lots of things in the demo project, lots of different layouts that are available. The one that he wants us to focus on is the dark dark layout. That looks like this. So this is basically exactly the image that you find in the book. And his method, or like one method of figuring out the actual dependencies, pardon me, let's see if I can make this a little bigger for us here. Hopefully that's somewhat legible. It is basically to use dev tools and then look at the head and see what's being brought in here. So we can kind of quickly inspect, and again, let me know if this is like too small. We can see that we've got a few, yeah, these are all the meta tags. Okay, so now we're starting here. We have the libraries, the CSS that's coming from a few different places. It's locally loaded, JQ, MV map, selectize, et cetera. So lots of CSS coming from this dist folder. Which the author said is where the meat of things lies. Tabler core, which is again this Tabler CSS. There are a few other things. I think the author says this flags part is quite heavy, and so he's excluding it. And then below the in the body we can see this, or below the body we can see this, the JavaScript that's coming in with the script tag. So we've got Bootstrap, bundled version of Bootstrap. We've got jQuery, apex charts, and a few other things that we saw kind of in this other view of the project. And then, of course, the tabler core, right? So this tabler JavaScript, as well as like a few inline functions. And so kind of a little bit his method, at least as I could kind of intuit it, is that, here you have on the left the page, like this is the demo page, and his idea is just go through and eliminate things from the DOM and eliminate things from the dependencies and just see what remains. So in a way, that's like one exploratory way of kind of stumbling around and figuring out which are the pieces to keep and which are the pieces to exclude. Let's say I could care less about this map. Okay, what are the things that are associated with the map, and what then can I cut? But I really like this graph. What are the things that are part of the graph that I need to keep, etc. So that's, as I understand, like his like broad, maybe not super explicit, but like broad advice about how to go about figuring out like what to keep from the project. Yeah, I guess I'll stop. Maybe I'll stop there, see if there are any comments, questions.
I mean, I really like some of the visualizations and I love the theme and everything, but no, I don't have any particularly valuable comments, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, they really are quite nice. They really are quite nice. I remember looking at that and thinking, how can I do this with R? Maybe the answer is not in some cases. Okay, so let's imagine that for, in general, for like some template that we've identified, we figured out what the things are, what are the dependencies we must keep, right? And so for this particular case, for Tabler, we know what they are. How then to bring these dependencies that are dependencies of this project, right, into R, into Shiny as dependencies there. And so the secret, whereas whereas kind of the web dev world has its own way of bundling dependencies, so too do we have, a way of bundling dependencies in R. And the answer here is with this function from the HTML tools package, HTML dependency. And what you'll want to do is kind of the following, like just for kind of clarity of exposition here, he uses like a CDN rather than local files, but really, yeah, as you can see right here with this note, he recommends that in actuality, you would want to use local files rather than what they are on from some content delivery network. So really, what you need to do with HTML dependency is have a name of the dependency, have some version, where to find it, where its source code can be found. In this case, you'll notice this tabler_cdn is just it points to where Tabler can be found. This particular version of Tabler can be found on the content delivery network. So you just follow that link, and here you are with what's available on the CDN. And then you can have kind of like named components here for the JavaScript component, and then for the style sheet, the CSS component, script and style sheet. So kind of if we looked at this a little bit more for HTML dependency, you can see here you've got this HTML dependency. This function basically just like creates a, I guess you can say like a dependency object that can then be put into a web page, basically. So again, you have the name, the version, as you saw before. There's a meta tag here that I haven't looked at. If you want to manually insert some meta tags, the script, which is the JavaScript, HTML, etc. So this is where you want to look for defining these dependencies. And so they've done this for Tabler, for the kind of Tabler core that we saw before, which consists of the JavaScript and the CSS. And then they do the same with Bootstrap. So here we're targeting Bootstrap version 4.3.1, which is the version that's being used by Tabler. So accordingly, we have a name for the dependency, a version, a source, Normally this, if you're distributing this as a package, this would be a local file that'd be local to the package, but here for convenience, we're making it the address on the content delivery network. And since Bootstrap, and we're targeting the JavaScript portion here. And then kind of so basically what we need to do is we need to specify each dependency individually. That's kind of step number one. And then step number two is to bundle them up somehow. So to bundle them up. Basically to bundle them up, you can kind of, there may be a more modern way of doing this actually. And I didn't have time to look into this, but the way that the book shows it is basically says, let's create like some, let's attach these dependencies to some arbitrary tag within the DOM. And so let's create a function that does that. So here you list the dependencies and list them importantly in a particular order. So list them in the order in which they need to be loaded. So first you need to load Bootstrap 4, then Tabler, because Tabler depends on Bootstrap 4. So order matters here. And then you'll basically attach these dependencies to some tag that the function provides. And below the author, just for kind of exposition purposes, says let's just let this tag be an arbitrary div, just a div. So then you can use this attach Tabler function. So first let's create a div tag, and you can use this find dependencies function from HTML tools. Find dependency basically like returns as kind of a list object, the dependencies that are associated with a particular target tag. So since this is a div with nothing else going on, there are no dependencies. But now let's take a div, another div, and pass it as the tag that's expected by this function add Tabler dependencies. And then we'll create that tag. And now we can inspect, kind of like find dependencies. It basically allows you to inspect as a list the dependencies that exist. And so here you can see as the output that you've got this list, kind of list object, this dependency object here. So it's a set of dependencies. So you have a list of lists basically. Kind of the first element of the list is Bootstrap. So remember, this is the first one that we provided, and then the second dependency is Tabler, and then you can see all of those named attributes that we passed to the HTML dependency object, and that's basically how one could go about attaching, like bundling up the dependencies. So you need to like take the dependencies and create a dependency object using HTML dependency for each dependency that a template has, and then you need to bundle them up. And the author is showing here this attach, sorry, where is it? Attach dependencies function from HTML tools, which basically allows you have some object that you pass, which is the X right here. You pass some value, which would be your HTML dependency object, and then a flag about whether you want to append. And so in our case, since we have multiple dependencies, we would want to append. Yeah. Now, I think there's a different way of doing this, because I was reading in the docs here for attached dependency, and yeah, here we go. It says, as of HTML tool 0.3.4, HTML dependencies can be attached without using attached dependencies. Instead, they can be added inline like a child object or a tag or tag list. So in other words, you can just like have a set of dependencies and kind of inline them somehow. And I wonder indeed if this is what's being done for other packages that seem to draw on web tools like let me see, like let's say waiter, for example, like use waiter. So there are lots of these packages where you have this function that you need to include, I think typically in the UI component of the Shiny app, that's like, use waiter, use Shiny widgets, use BS4 dash, things like that. I'm wondering if actually those functions are like, they're basically attaching the dependencies to your Shiny object, kind of like a little bit unbeknownst to us, like behind the scenes. That was just one thing I started to wonder, but I didn't have the time didn't have the time to inspect. Maybe if you'll bear with me, maybe I can actually look and see if that's the case. Whoops. Let's see, waiter. It's called use waiter. Come on. All right, let me approach this a different way. Jump in if you know the name of this function. Is it use waiter? Is that what it is? You don't know? It's one of those things you write once and don't really think about much thereafter. Let's see if it's here in waiter. Yeah, use waiter. Okay. Use waiter. Auto waiter. Okay. Use waiter. HTML dependencies, waiter. And yeah, and then it's, I guess it's taking the waiter version from the package. Okay, he's bundling it. I guess it's packer. Yeah. And if memory serves, I think for waiter, you're meant to put that in the UI somewhere. So I guess in this particular case, there's one dependency, and it's just getting attached, like bundled inline in the UI. There might be a couple other cases. Let's see, shiny widgets. Okay. Okay, maybe I'm misremembering this one. But in any event, I think that's kind of like a few examples in the wild of or one example in the wild of this approach where we're basically kind of like declaring the dependencies with HTML dependency, having HTML dependency point towards some files that are stored locally within a package, if we're going to roll it as a package, and then like attaching that dependency or set of dependencies to your DOM through a few means, like either this attach dependencies function and attaching it to some kind of arbitrary tag within the DOM, or alternatively, I guess is now seems to be possible, just having it be inlined as some kind of object within some kind of child object within the UI. I'll stop there. Questions, comments, concerns about my sanity?
Yeah, so so the dependencies, so the inline specification is like you're still using an HTML dependency object, but you
Yep.
add it kind of right.
At least that's my read of things, is that
Yeah.
it just be like
That's quite interesting.
some object, right? Doesn't have to be necessarily a tag that
Yeah,
has like a dependency attached to it.
cool. Yeah, so wait. Yeah, sorry, does anyone else have any questions? Okay. Right. So So where do we go from here? We're defining the we're demonstrating how to attach to. So I can imagine us defining a package here that that includes Tabler and the other dependencies that were mentioned in its in some subdirectory, and we and as users of that package, you would do attach dependencies and pull the HTML dependency from that package. Um, now, what do I need? Yes, so do I do I so but the dependencies, it's not like you call attach dependencies on its own within your Shiny code. It's like you attach the dependencies to specific tags and things like that, and then
Yeah,
so like
in this
if
particular case, it seems like yes. So I mean, kind of they're saying like, well, just run a silly, like run an arbitrary Shiny app right here that's kind of
hmm,
devoid of content.
yeah. No, it just it seemed interesting because like if we're defining a custom element within a package that um within which Tabler is embedded, it's the package author will attach the appropriate dependencies to all of the elements that are exported, but that you can create from the functions that are exported by that package. And in that setting, I guess as the user of that package, you wouldn't necessarily see the HTML dependency or the
Nope.
attached dependency code written.
I mean, you could see it in the source code for sure
Yeah, yeah,
if you went looking, but yeah, I mean, you wouldn't. You might just have to have. I mean, this is kind of a guess at this stage, a little speculative, Russ. But I'm guessing you might have to have this kind of like single incantation at the, like use whatever the name is of the package and as a function. So like seemingly to us, it's just some function you have to run or invoke somewhere in your Shiny UI, but it has the effect of like attaching these dependencies for you. That's my
yeah, yeah,
guess. Yeah, but otherwise, like all of the everything else is taken care of by just attaching these dependencies, like
yeah,
pointing like R towards where these JavaScript and CSS, you know, where those things can be found.
yeah. And there was a discussion of whether it's better in some settings to use a CDN rather than embedding the code inside your R package, particularly for submission to CRAN. Um, so yeah, I do wonder, like, I mean, how big these dependencies can be, like, because it
Yeah,
seems like the mindset is quite different for a tool like this. I mean, I guess the Shiny package itself is on a comparable lines of code scale as things like Bootstrap and that, but most star packages are considerably smaller. And so it just seems surprising that including a, some a JavaScript script would push your package size so large to me. But yeah. Um cool, cool. Yes, so the idea of using a CDN is so that like you you don't have to presumably it's possible if you're using a CDN to specify that you want to use the latest version of a package or the latest minor version of a um, JavaScript library
Yeah, I
rather
guess
than
so.
having yeah
I was
um,
puzzling about that too. I mean, it might make things a little fragile for you, or at least have you as an author be. Means you could, I guess. Sorry, this is quite small. Looks like here you could target these versions. Not sure if this is a distinct version or not. And then it just looks like it just modifies the URL. It's almost kind of like a query. So table are at 1.00, and then these are, I guess, alpha releases
yeah.
with numbers. Yeah, I don't know how you would do latest. I mean, maybe it depends on like which CDN you're using, if they have
Mm.
like a method for handling those kinds of requests. So Russ, I seem to recall that you wrapped some widgets after the last book club. Did you go through these steps? And if so, like how did you handle like attaching the dependencies? Did you create a package or was it just like a one-off?
Yeah, well, virtually everything we do is in packages, so it would have been um, w- um, the from memory. Uh, uh, I can't actually show you the code, but from memory, the the thing we in so there was a JavaScript package defined by one of my colleagues that we um, distributed as part of the R package that contained the widget. So, um, so like we had, yeah. So following the workflow that they had in the JavaScript for our book, the the minified JavaScript thing was stored in a kind of inst HTML widgets directory. And but how was it made available to uh, fairly certain how we made? I'm sure we would have used HTML dependencies
If
somewhere.
from the package perspective, I guess it was just in the inst, like you copy the stuff in the
Yeah.
inst directory.
Mm, yeah. But I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah, I think we used I think HTML widgets create widget made is that right? Does it make the dependency? Actually, hold on. What's the license on this? I'll show it on the screen. Yeah, no, it's a public package anyway. Right. Um, someone else is sharing. Um, yeah. So um, but yeah, I mean, the workflow's pretty similar, and I suspect under the hood, the function that we used, which is like from the HTML widgets package, probably probably uses HTML dependency under the hood somehow. Maybe like implicitly, if it finds scripts in that HTML widgets subdirectory, it will attach um, the relevant scripts as an HTML dependency, but I don't know. It seemed fairly. But if it's just following a recipe, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's quite interesting. I like the idea that you the purpose of HTML dependency is it's it's mainly used for package developers. There was a there was something mentioned. I can't remember whether it was part of this book where it was like if you need to if you're working in an app rather than in a package, it's like I mean if you're working against an app.r file and you've got some custom JavaScript that you've written, you shouldn't use um, the HTML dependency workflow is far more than you actually need when you can just kind of put those scripts in the www directory of your Shiny app and it will be
Right.
automatically delivered. Um, but yeah, it's really neat, this HTML dependency thing, and particularly when there's like it seems to be able to handle conflicts, which I found quite surprising. But I don't know entirely how it can manage them. Because I mean, I could imagine having one JavaScript library that needs Bootstrap 3 and one that needs Bootstrap 4 or something similar like that. And exactly how it can handle those kind of conflicts, um, unless it just says you simply can't use two versions of the same library or something.
Yeah. No idea on that one. Oh yeah, just to add, I think the author mentioned ZS at the outset, but I think there are a few uh shiny semantic. It's from Epsilon. So this is maybe kind of like another worked example. I mean, it's not meant to be a worked example, but okay, this isn't quite what I wanted, but maybe it'll point me to the shiny semantic. I Googled too quickly. Semantic.
So semantic is something similar to Tabler then in this setting, and it's like
Yeah,
a
it seems to be like basically a template that's using kind of more modern components, and so it seems like it's managing, this
hmm,
package is kind of like managing. How should I put it? It's doing all of the work of sourcing the right dependencies and then providing an interface to R// Shiny users for all this in the form of functions we might expect with like the usual interface. But I think this one is using, I want to say it's even Bootstrap 5.
yeah, I do find this stuff quite interesting because I imagine I would probably end up tripping myself up,
Yep.
being so used to which functions I'm supposed to use in Shiny that when I make a dependency on something that, you know, if you did use Bootstrap 3, it would be in conflict with the um, the the other frameworks that are in place. So presumably you have to use functions that you either use that subset of Shiny functions that are compatible with
Mm,
the 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 framework that you want to use, or you have to rely on the package developers to implement all the buttons and sliders and widgets that you need from that framework. Um, yeah.
or maybe like somehow like um, I can tell you, like, in some of my small Shiny efforts, I think on one project in which I'm working right now, I think we're really using kind of components from different packages. So one is, you know, like BS4 dash
Yeah.
from David. And then we're using, you know, base Shiny stuff as well. And there's seemingly there's no, seems to be no problem. I mean, I wonder if it's just the case that somehow like the way that both like CSS and JavaScript refer to the components, there's no ambiguity about kind of the, how should I put it? That if I'm using a button from vanilla Shiny and there exists also a button in BS4 dash, and indeed I think there does, that like somehow the reference to those in the relevant like CSS and JavaScript are specific enough that they can target those buttons. So like my vanilla Shiny button, you know, happily uses Bootstrap 3's, you know, like JavaScript and you know, like
Yeah.
the click events and, you know, little pseudo animations and then styling from Bootstrap 3, whereas, you know, buttons that we use from BS4 dash, you know, use the relevant JavaScript and CSS from that package. But that's just a guess. That's a guess. I mean, for you guys, Russ, are you kind of going all in for like one framework, or are you mixing and matching as well without so much problem?
Um, it's very rare that I use anything. I don't know. I mean, we use things like Shiny Dashboard and stuff like that, and but I haven't really needed to use things like semantic or any other kind of templating things that much, really. So it's not something that's tripped me up that much. To be honest, for Shiny stuff, I tend to end up doing a lot of the kind of back end work rather than the front end kind of design type work. But anyway, right. Are there any further questions in the room? No. Okay. Cool. I think we'll call an end to it, and we are. Oh, right. Okay. Um, and we'll meet again next week when we're going to look at the next chapter, which is about um, 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 what are we doing now? Presumably defining elements, are we? Yeah, template
Yep.
elements. Um, great. Anyway, I shall see you all next week, and